Welcome to Organizational Sherlocks, the podcast where business meets psychology and your organizational puzzles meet their match.
Join us for captivating stories and practical solutions to unravel your toughest challenges.
I'm Dr. Elizabeth Fleming.
And I'm Morgan Ashworth, your guides to a prescription for business success.
Let's dive in. Hey, Morgan. Go on. I know we're both jumping in right away. We're just so jazzed.
Yeah. How you doing, Elizabeth?
Doing good. How are you?
Doing fine on this beautiful Tuesday morning.
Yes, it is very nice outside. I'm loving the summer, so I wish I could keep it all year round, but I chose the wrong.
I'll be honest, I'm kind of enjoying the earlier sunsets that are happening. Like, I love that I can see, like, as they say, the golden hour. It's starting to happen more than like 5-6 o'clock, and I don't know, I kind of like it.
That's totally fair. I chose the wrong geographic region to live in because I would prefer it's just like summer all year long. So I think maybe there's something to think about in the future, but that's okay. My plants are starting to grow in. I've got like tons of jalapenos and tomatoes and all that good stuff. So I'm excited about that for the rest of the summer.
Good. Yeah. Very good. Well, I feel like this is a good transitional podcast that we're having today. You know, we've been talking about the different tracks of industrial organizational psychology that, you know, someone might take, whether that be they studied IO psychology or they're getting into the realm, and or for some leaders to get to know where IOs work. But today we're actually going to be talking a little bit more about why it could be helpful to either bring an IO psychologist or psychology professional on the team and or consult with one. So I'm really excited because I think we'll be highlighting some important facts based off of our last few conversations.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons that people might, like you said, bring someone on the team and or, hire a consultant to come and help with things. Of course, we're not going to be able to explain all of the reasons because there's so many. And I think that kind of speaks to the cool part about IO, the part that I love so much is that there's so much breadth to what someone can do, right? And I think for many IO professionals or IO psychologists, it's finding what their niche is and then being able to really target that niche, right? And so I think even if you're considering bringing someone on your team, it might be looking at like, this is the issue, or this is the task or the responsibilities that we need this person to do. Think job descriptions, like we talked about in season 1, right? And then what type of IO professional in what their niche is, like how would that meet the needs of that particular job description? Similarly with a consultant, what kind of consultant are you looking for? If you're, for instance, I'll just give like a super brief example and just say, if you're looking for change management, right, you're probably not going to go to somebody who has a niche in, say, leadership development, right? Because it's not the same type of work. Not to say they couldn't do both, but when you're looking at kind of really identifying that niche and understanding all of that, those are the kind of people that, you go on Google and say, I need an IO psychologist in this area, right?
Yes. I think it's a good point to make that, you might know an IO psychology professional, or you might know someone that's kind of working in the business consulting space, but you need to ensure that whomever you do work with is the one applicable to what you need help with. Don't just work with a certain type of consultant because they're easy to access because they might not have the specialty in the area you need help with. But I would love to highlight, some of the, I guess, tasks that an IO psychology professional might assist with, whether that be internally or in a consulting framework. Elizabeth, do you have any top of mind that you want to talk about?
Different tasks? Yeah, I mean, obviously, my two areas of my main area of expertise is around organizational development, right? And change management and that kind of stuff. However, I also think about leadership development. I think about HR. I think about, talent development, like learning. I keep using the word development, but maybe there's a theme there for IO psychologists. I don't know. But like L&D, Yeah, right. L&D though, learning and development, training, all of those things. I think there's a lot of different places to go, but then there's also the more quantitative side around data analytics and all of those pieces. So those are just some that come to mind for me initially.
Yeah, I think to kind of lay a good foundation for the leaders listening in on what you might bring an IO psychology professional to help with would be, you're trying to get more into the nitty-gritty of the individual people, and how to align that best with the organization. And so while you might be focusing on the overall organizational goals, you might not have the knowledge of how best to align the people to the organizational mission, the vision, how to motivate them, how to ensure that their training is connected with the skill sets that your organization needs to grow, and also building that buy-in from them. And so I would argue that, you bring in an IO psychology professional to be able to understand that person on the almost cellular level and connect it to the more maximal effect of the organization for you. And they do that in a variety of manners, whether that be the job description and how best to write them, to, build understanding and comprehension in the individual. So basically helping you communicate the job in the best manner possible to the individual. Sometimes there's kind of an artistic effect there too on how it's organized. So it can be something along those lines. It could be, it could be talent acquisition. Talent acquisition is actually an area that IO psychology professionals work in, where they can figure out the questions to ask that help determine whether there's an alignment between the individual's values and the organizational values. Someone that has the, as I call them, the 3 pillars of success is more likely to be a long-term employee. So those three pillars I tend to utilize and ask questions about, without asking the questions is, how might they find meaning in the people that they work with? How might they find meaning in the process? Or what meaning have they found in previous processes they've worked in? And then what meaning they might find within the product. I have actually a really good example. I hired someone on who was all about sustainability. She's a designer. She's on our team still, obviously. So I asked her what she knew about the company, and then we see how the questions evolved from there. And she noted sustainability. So I knew she, 1, did research on the company, and 2, I got to ask more specific questions about, what interests you about sustainability and yada yada yada. That's actually one of our values, and talking about it in a more thorough manner. Then we have I ask about the teams she's worked in before. I ask about the group projects she may have worked on before, and I figure out what type of relationships she naturally develops in a professional manner, and or if she becomes friends with them. Then also talking about the overall process, why is the position of interest to them? Is there anything that concerns them about the position? Is there anything that that the position excites them about? And that way you can kind of understand, will they like the process of the position? So designing, are they artistic? Do they like graphic design? Do they like using the Adobe system? Are they capable of using the Adobe system? So being able to touch on all those pillars helps me know that this person is a longer term employee. So talent acquisition, asking the right questions. And I mean, that kind of takes me to Elizabeth. Something you do is you kind of work in the psychometric sphere, asking the right questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's asking the right questions, measuring the right constructs, which actually, as you were talking, it made me think, right, that sometimes, I think we're kind of talking right now, like a company might know exactly what they need, right? And sometimes, and let's just be honest, sometimes that's not true. We might not know exactly what we need, right? And so adding another position to the already built hierarchy or whatever organizational structure they have, right? Just the team may feel a little scary for some business owners. And I think that's at times when bringing in a consultant is helpful, right? Because you're not adding them to payroll with benefits and all of those things. It's more of, there's a project or an idea we're trying to I guess like something we're trying to explore and figure out, right? And so there have been times too where, you know, I've worked with organizations and they say like, we know we need somebody, we just don't know what who that person is. Do we need somebody in the HR space? Do we need somebody in the, you know, the talent acquisition, like you said, or training, or where is it in the organization that we need to put this person based on what's going on? And that's where some of those, I'd say both qualitative and quantitative even pieces can come in from an assessment perspective of like, let's figure out what you actually need. And then we can walk alongside you and help you identify what skill set those people may have. So it's kind of like a reverse engineering a little bit of a position, right? Instead of saying, I know I need this type of person and these skills, we're looking at from kind of the back end first and saying, let's make sure that what we think we need is really what we need. Because that can be really hard as an organization to hire somebody thinking you need one thing and then learning later, oh, maybe we needed someone else. And maybe not even an IO person, like who knows, right?
Yeah. And I would
that's really hard.
I was gonna say, and I would also argue, like within you don't know exactly what you need. Sometimes you over focus on certain skill sets in hiring for a position, and don't focus as much on other skill sets. So, for example, I have started to say to my leaders, even if the person doesn't have the hard knowledge of a certain software, do they have the cognitive capacity to learn that software? And it's great to hear my leaders and managers starting to say cognitive capacity, because that is a very psychological term, but it's a really easy way to explain it. It's, do they have the ability within their brain? Do they have the skill set to learn hard knowledge, black and white softwares? If they do, great. What have they worked with before, even if it's not what we use? But more importantly, do they have the natural, what they tended to overlook was, do they have a natural capacity to lead? Do they have a natural level of empathy or leadership skills? Have they showed leadership in the past? Have they been able to work with this individual? Do they have a high EI, emotional intelligence, or EQ, your emotional quotient? So, they focus too heavily on softwares and, the physical capabilities of the person rather than the more, I guess, emotional and the kind of the more tactile ways to work with people. Those skill sets they tended to overlook. And like, you're looking at hard skills only, you're failing to look at soft skills. And that's why you're not having an individual who's able to be successful in this role. They have all the hard skills, but they're not naturally autonomous. They're not naturally internally motivated. They don't connect to the 3 pillars of the company, right? And I know we're talking on this on a person by person, position by position sense right now, but I do want to bring in that an IO psychology professional is going to look at person by person, position by position, to ensure that the entire foundational piece of the hierarchy is held together. They're trying to be the glue, because if you have one missing piece of the hierarchy, it could kind of all topple down, rather than now they can look at position by position, person by person, and connect them to the other positions across the company, across the hierarchy, to help you with growth planning.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely more of a holistic view. I think that's the part I love about my job more than anything. And I can give you a specific example of kind of the hard skill. I don't like the term soft skill personally. It's a bias of mine because I don't think it's soft to have empathy. But
I think it's more. I call it a gray area skill almost. Like it's
I call them essential skills. I call them essential skills because we are humans and we are built on relationships. And so for me, I think they're essential. So just for anyone listening, I am talking about the quote unquote soft skills, even though I don't like calling them that. But I work with a lot of manufacturing companies, as you know, and do a lot of assessments, right? A lot of pre-hire assessments, as well as development assessments. And I would say, like, if I were to walk in, and this is hypothetically, I don't do this, but if I were to walk in and say, I'm only going to measure the mechanical and numerical reasoning of these people, right? And not at all think about how they relate to others, how open they are to experience, all of that, I might be causing more damage than good, right? Because it might be, like a really important job that is potentially pretty dangerous as well, right? And so if we are not thinking about what's around us, if we're not, again, even thinking about procedure, are we following procedure to make sure those safety standards are being followed? All of those different pieces, you can't measure someone's adherence to rules and regulations by measuring their mechanical reasoning, right? Like that, those two things don't exist together. I mean, there's some relation, yes. I'm not saying they don't fully, but we need to also understand, are they going to challenge the status quo? Because that may not be beneficial in, say a factory setting, right? Where we need them to actually understand the process, engage with it, all of those things. So instead, when I'm working with these companies, I'm looking at both sides of the coin, right? We're looking at, again, and it depends on the client, which assessments I'm using, but, potentially mechanical reasoning, numerical reasoning, abstract reasoning, verbal reasoning, whatever it may be. And at the same time, looking at things like empathy and, introversion versus extroversion and openness to experience. If you think about the big five, right? The OCEAN acronym.
The big five personality traits.
Big five personality traits. Yeah. And that, again, that's not, I use many tools. So for some, it kind of depends on the purpose and the level and all those things. But as a consultant, I think it's really important for me to understand, what does that company think they need right now? What do they think they need in the future? What's their vision? Where are they going? And then selecting the right assessments that will give them the information they need to make informed decisions to go in the direction that they would like to go. Mm-hmm. So again, just to giving that example, I think the biggest part of that is it tends to be more holistic, right? I'm hoping to give my clients an opportunity to see the whole picture, right? And how those things interact with each other, because you may have the smartest human on the planet, but you really need the smartest human on the planet and the person who can follow the rules while also being really good on a team, right? All of those things can be existing at the exact same time.
Yeah.
But you may need to then, you would need to find a specific type of person or person that has certain personality characteristics that would allow for that to flourish in that environment. So I know it's a really long explanation, but I do think that the holistic view is really one of those things that tends to set IOs apart.
Yeah, and I think that's why IOs are so involved in TNA, talent acquisition, regularly, because it's hard to get that holistic view through typical interviews, right? It really can be. And so bringing in an individual that helps with, maybe psychometric testing, I feel that those are actually becoming extremely common, especially for larger organizations. But bringing that into the fold and helping with the interviewing, that way you get more of that generalized perspective, and also you can kind of ask about certain traits of theirs through the interview, and that way you might be able to get to know maybe when they took the test, this is how they are, but maybe they are moldable into being more of a leader, and maybe they're not quite ready for the position right now, but do we have a position underneath that position that allows them to go through L&D, learning and development, training or training to get to that level? So now we're talking about succession planning, actually, that an IO psychology professional might assist you with. And so I actually am looking at that right now. I'm looking at two positions. One's a manager position, one's a supervisor position. They work really closely hand in hand because we have an unexpected retirement happening. And with that, we had two managers working equally to each other. Well, now if we're bringing someone in, we're not going to bring them in equal to the other managers. So we're going to have them be the assistant manager. And then that supervisor is now under the assistant manager. So, but as I'm looking at these candidates, I'm looking for succession planning too. Yeah. So I'm making sure that one candidate can go into the next role, which can go into the next role, even if they don't have the experience right now or the full capability. I can tell, thanks to my testing and interviewing that we did, the questions surrounding the testing we did, that we know they are likely capable of developing into that next role, which will ultimately assist the organization with growth over time. So that is an important note, I feel, to make. And then it brings in the learning and development side, where someone is actually looking to either test individuals for their current aptitudes or skill sets, and then see where they need to develop, and or putting them through trainings to get them to a level where they are eventually able to maintain that growth of the hierarchy that the organization needs. If you're not growing, if you're stagnant, you're not necessarily people tend to say, if you're not a growing company, you're not a successful company. You're stagnant, and you're potentially going to start decreasing your decreasing your sales. And so because of that, growth is natural. It's natural to the economy. It's natural to businesses. And so you have to plan for it. And L&D, learning and development / training, that helps prepare for growth because it's preparing your people for growth.
Right.
Too, though, learning and development might also be involved in the onboarding process. So ensuring that you can train efficiently and effectively so that someone can become more autonomous more quickly. So there are a lot of areas that, again, an IO psychology professional can work in. They can work in the nitty-gritty of hiring for a position, of planning for succession, of the onboarding side of the process. So those are a few, I think, areas to first focus on. But there are more high-level areas an IO psychology professional could assist with too.
Right. Well, and I think that speaks to the kind of the high level thing that you just said. Like, I think that speaks to, when you're really just starting out in this world, getting that experience not only gives you some of those skills, right? And like maybe staying a little bit higher level, it helps you build those skills, but I think it also helps you identify what niche you might want to go into, right? Because I don't know about you, Morgan, but there have been times where I've done things and I'm like, yeah, I know I could do that. And not that I couldn't do it, but man, I did not love it. Like, I didn't have a passion for it. You know what I mean? I'm guessing the same is true for you. But, and so I think but I wouldn't have known that had I not taken the time to try to experience it, right? And so I think there's a lot of power in also kind of opening, just from not the employer perspective, but from an employee or a professional perspective, giving yourself that time to really experience different things so that you can identify what your niche is. And then, dig deep into that space once you figure it out,
Yeah, and I guess I would say for
change too. I just want to say that too. Like, it's okay if you want to change in the future.
I mean, the average person changes their career 3 times on a higher level and 7 times on a granular level. So
yeah, well, I mean, that's again the cool thing about IO, right? Is it's so broad that you have the ability, like if you change, you don't have to completely leave the field, and go into some other, I don't know, something else. I don't know, like nursing. I've been hanging out with nurses a lot recently, so that makes me think about it. Like, you know what I mean? Though, like, whatever. But I mean, but there maybe it's redefining or re-examining what's bringing you joy and what are you passionate about in that season of life. I think that's the cool thing that I also really love about IO.
Yeah. And I think that's actually a good note for leaders in organizations too, thinking of working with an IO professional, is that, someone may have had a previous niche, but their current niche is more applicable to what you need. But with that previous niche that they had, they can actually bring in a greater knowledge for you. Because let's be honest, people operations and the people sphere of business, there are so many little pieces that interconnect with one another. So even if you feel you might need to work with 3 different consultants, you might be able to work with an individual one because they have previous niches to what they did. And they did have to learn it all at one point in time, though they might not be as much of an expert in certain areas as their niche. It doesn't mean they don't know it. So while it's important to align best with the consultant's current expertise area, current niche, don't be afraid to bring them other things that interconnect with that niche that you also need assistance with. Before we log off, though, I did want to note something on the more higher level side with IOs. I feel while IOs definitely will look at kind of the nitty gritty, they'll look in the granular level of people, positions, the hierarchy itself too. It's important to note that IOs can help you on the more maximal level. So if they're going to look at the individual people and positions and skill sets in order to build the greater plan for you. So all in all, they might look at hierarchical planning. They might look at even the mission and vision of the organization to make sure that how you're trying to sell yourself is the way in which you're selling yourself. There's a branding almost side to it, but the difference is that when you're quote unquote branding, you're more so branding to your employees on the IO psychology realm. But that's not to say that there are not IOs that also work in consumer psychology, which is more on the sales side. Again, they're going to now look at the granular level of how things are getting marketed, how the psychometrics of marketing sales are, changing the satisfaction of your customers, just like an IO might test the satisfaction of the employees and look at the culture on a granular and maximal level. They can do the same thing on a granular and maximal level with your customers and with your wanted clientele. That's another one, is your desired clientele too, that you might not be reaching yet.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I mean, I think one of the biggest things that I'll say, and I think it's similarly said, but a little bit different in the sense that it's also like thinking about as an organization, like the cost savings that comes from having an IO on staff or as a consultant. I really truly believe this. It's, even if you are looking at things or examining things from the individual level, whatever information you're taking from those individuals, it's that ability to really think about it more broadly. And how do you translate that into those individual, data points or whatever it is, and then build that into teams, and then build that into organizations, and build that back into the mission. Like, right, it's kind of a two-way flow, if you will. So I do think there's some cost savings there too for organizations who want to understand their people, but also want to understand how it connects to the bigger picture. And bringing an IO on staff and or as a consultant can really be helpful in that way.
Yeah, I feel that any time an IO is working as a consultant specifically, they're going to take more of that holistic view after taking into account the granular levels of it. But there are IOs that simply work on the granular level and are reporting to maybe a higher level IO who's the holistic one, right? You have the IOs that make learning and development. So even if you maybe consider yourself as a organizational leader to have that holistic view and to really understand kind of the nitty gritty, some, in the management space, some people do get that psychological knowledge. You don't have to have studied IO to be practicing IO psychology, but you might bring in IOs underneath you to help with some of the granular level needs, and maybe do some of the testing for you so that you have that more understated knowledge. I will say though, when you're working with an IO, you should usually be ready to be challenged.
Yeah.
Your preconceived assumptions will likely be challenged, but it's good for you to also challenge them back, because psychology is based off of a level of theories. There are best practices inside of the psychological realm, but it is based in theory. So if you feel that there's a challenge, it's good to assess every shortcoming that a plan may have, because in order to have effective change management, the plan for change needs to have taken into account all of the negative assumptions of what could come out of it, or all of the challenges it could face.
Sure. Yeah. No, I get you there, for sure. Well, I think this is a great conversation. Honestly, I could probably have it all day. I just think there's a lot of power there, and a lot of information that a lot of companies and people need about what IO really is. And so I'm glad that we're here doing all of this. It's part of our goal as Organizational Sherlocks, is to help people understand and help people think more deeply about IO as an applied science, which it is, and kind of what could it look like? Imagining what would it look like in your life, or what would it look like in your organization's life, if an organization can have a life. I don't know. But I think it could, right? I appreciate the conversation today, Morgan. Maybe we get our listeners back to their day. I know we have a couple great episodes coming up in the future. So we hope that you come back and listen to us. And of course, reach out if there's any questions or comments or thoughts that you might have. We love to engage with our listeners and keep building this community of IOs.
Yeah, and if the leaders out there, even IOs out there, have any questions on, hey, can I bring an IO psychology professional to help with this area? We'd love you to bring it to us, and we might bring one of our connections on who is an expert in that area if we're not, to talk more about it, and even potentially do a case study on your specific situation.
Absolutely. I think that's a great call. Plus, we have like a huge network of many different people. So if you're looking for someone in particular too, let us know, because we might know someone.
Yes, yeah, we definitely have a lot of people in the background in our network. So we'd be happy to refer them to you.
Awesome. Well, listeners, this concludes another intriguing episode of Organizational Sherlocks. I'm Elizabeth Fleming.
And I'm Morgan Ashworth, reminding you that the journey to success is an ongoing investigation.
Stay curious, stay strategic, and keep utilizing insights to decode your business mysteries.
Join us every Tuesday for your next Whodunit. This is Organizational Sherlocks closing today's case.
We'll see you all next time.